Hi, this is Ashley Hales, and I'm an editor and writer at the Mudroom and a writer at aahales.com. And we have the lovely privilege of having Shannan Martin here today. Hey, Shannan.
Hey, good morning.
Shannan, I know it's way too early on the West
For you.
Coast. I know.
I'm fine.
We're real fast. So we were at an Encourage meetup together, and I was like, "Yay, get to hang out with all
Oh
my
my Lord.
friends!" And then Shannan wasn't there, and I found out later as we were chatting that she was at death's door. So
I was at the ER in a city I've never been in before, and it was kind of a crazy ER. I'm just going to say
right.
that. But that seems to be kind of a pattern of my life. I wrote a similar story in the book. I mean, it seems like a lot of times when I'm in opportunities where I could whoa, I'm going to impress
right.
people.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure I look extra cute, and I'm going to be sure I'm extra witty and smart and kind. Man, God just takes me down. It's happened over and over again to the point that it's almost comical, and to the point that I'm afraid to go anywhere.
Right.
This morning when I told her, I'm just rolling like this on this.
Yeah. So we're so excited that she joined us, Mudroom Readers, today. She is the recent author of the book Falling Free, Rescued from the Life I Always Wanted. And we're just super excited. Yay, look at the pretty
There it is.
So Shannan, tell us just a little bit about the book. How did it come about? And what's the message of the book?
Yeah, the book came about over a long stretch of years. It's just, sort of the retelling of my family's story and how we detoured around the path we were on, which was kind of the very typical middle class, evangelical, no diversity American dream path. And that's kind of the world that we had grown up in. Both of us. It, as often happens, God came in a pretty dramatic way and got our attention and started to point us back to the gospel that we thought we knew really pretty well. I grew up in Awana. I don't know if everybody knows what Awana is, but I won a trophy one year. I'm just saying.
Yes.
So God got a hold of us and started to show us how much we didn't know and how much we had been unwilling to see. And pointedly, the gospel call to love the marginalized and fight for justice and love the poor and serve the poor and care for the orphan and the widow and all of these pretty practical, but not easy things to do. And we were left standing, on our farm looking around us, this piece of heaven that we lived on and that we thought we would never leave, and began to ask back, so what do you want from us? What can we do? What should we do? And that is the beginning of the story of Falling Free.
What was the reaction to that?
I mean, the reaction was largely uniform in that people just did not understand. People did not, they were confused at best and concerned at worst. It's amazing to see now how much, this Christian culture can just be saturated with this fearfulness of the world outside of the bubble. And we were part of that too. I mean, those were things that we had to really wrestle through, and we still have times that we have to remind ourselves what is true and remind ourselves that God does not speak to us through fear. And
so I would, you do say, I love this bit. I'm just going to read a little section here. We don't all have to move to the city or move to the six. Hallelujah. There is no one mission fits all. Heartbreak, loneliness, isolation, and lack aren't organized by zip code. And he's begging all of us not to detour around the pain. This is the unexpected road to abundance for us and for our children. The irony is, not only are we hesitant to allow our kids to live in the world on mission, we're also eager to use them as prime scapegoats for our own bailout. So how have you lived on mission with your kids where you are? And what does that look like?
I can't put my kids directly on the path of salvation. And I mean, Robert down to my youngest. I mean, I think I I came into this stage of my life thinking that if I did the right things, if I checked off all the little things on the list, if I sheltered my kids and protected them from the world and, did all of these things, then I was kind of guaranteed certain outcomes. And so I see now that I was never tasked with that. And that's a tremendous relief. And it's also a little scary because now the good things they do aren't on me either, for one thing.
Yeah.
Like I can't cherry pick that. For me and for Corey and I together, one of the kind of defining things for us was beginning to understand that if God called us to do something, he called all of us. So we had to wrestle ourselves away from this perspective that, well, God, we're adults, so God's got work for us to do, and hopefully our kids are going to be okay. Just, they weren't along for our ride. I mean, they were every bit a part of this. And honestly, they would be the ones teaching us quite a bit along the way. When we arrived at our neighborhood, just as an example, I mean, I'll give a little bit of context. So our neighborhood, when we arrived, was a declining neighborhood that we moved in. We drove past houses that I just would imagine all kinds of things that were probably going on in these homes. And it turns out I was right. And a lot of our biggest fears, we showed up and thought like, oh, we were scared about this and we were worried about this. And it was all true. So when God has work for us to do, and this sounds so cheesy and sort of trite, but the hardest, biggest part of the work happens in our hearts. And so, and I've talked about this a lot, and I Instagram about it a lot, and you asked me about it before we started recording. Last year, I made the very no-brainer decision to begin walking my kids to school. So I'm very ashamed to say that for the first 2 years that we lived here, we hopped in the van and we drove to the school every morning, and the school is 2 blocks away, and I'm not even joking.
Oh, I know. I know the crazy of getting your kids.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. We didn't plan for it. We were always running late. That is very much how my family operates, and I am largely to blame, I'm sure. But it took me way too long to realize, these neighbors that I love and that I'm dying to be in relationship with, I am literally passing them by every morning as they are walking in the rain, holding umbrellas, and as they're walking in the bitter cold snow, and as they're walking in the sun, and they're talking to their kids, and I'm wanting to get to know them, and I am driving by every morning. So last year I just, God spoke to me about it. I'm sure I came to the conclusion that we were going to walk. And so we walk every day. And there's something to be said for just passing each other by.
Have you, as a white woman in your neighborhood, really listened to people of color? And I know your son's African American, and it's such a complicated and very hot topic of this phase. Yeah, how have you kind of navigated some of those waters?
And I'm just speaking very candidly here with you because it's early in the morning. I don't know.
Yeah, that's good.
It's just something. It's my truest heart. Like my heart is for all of us to belong to each other, and we do, and we are. But it is slow work. People, if you're raised very much under a bubble, excuse me, we do take on biased information about people of other races, about people of other religious backgrounds, about people of other political backgrounds, on and on and on and on. And it does color our world. And I have had the opportunity to come, and I'm by no means saying that I am arrived at a place of wonderful enlightenment on any of this, but I have had the extreme privilege of, adopting our son as a young man, an African-American son. And that has just, we have a multicultural family. None of my kids are of my race. And, Robert is older. And so, we see his world and we see his friends and his biological family. And it has forced us to confront biases that we did not know that we had. This is the fight of my life, one of them. And it's something Corey and I just talked about here in the kitchen yesterday for quite some time, because I still live in a neighborhood where in some ways and less so than it used to be. But I have a tendency to feel sometimes like I'm on the outside looking in some ways, because I see these Latina moms, I see them at the bus stop, and we say hi, and we try and we try and we try. Yeah. I try and I try, and they do too. Yeah. But then they all walk off together. And that was the moment yesterday. Like, I'm like, okay, I don't speak Spanish, very, very little, and so they're walking off together, and happy and chattering, and I'm the one kind of feeling a little like, okay, Yeah. I want to be clear that I was never. And I'm not ever thinking, I need to be friends with these people so that I can come in and, help them or save them. They don't need my help, and they certainly don't need me to try to save them, but I need them as my friends.
How do we begin to make space for very ordinary things like you're talking about, so that we can see the needs and hurt and loss around us? How have you made that margin, and how have you seen, how have you been able to see the mundane as something worth pursuing?
Yeah. And I think that's why my walk to school has become so transformational, is that it forces me to slow down and pay attention. And once we begin to and I mean that in the most literal way. Right. It forces me to notice the sky and the trees and the homes and the people, but mostly it's just my physical world that I'm paying attention to. And it makes me love my place. Right. And the more I love my place and love its people, the more I'm open to those little tiny mundane opportunities that come by.
How have you battled fear? So, because when you said when you moved in, right, that fear was, that all of these things that you imagined were happening behind doors were actually happening. Yeah. So how have you kind of not been motivated by fear, and actually been motivated to love and to learn from your neighbors?
We were suffocating under a bubble where there was no diversity, socioeconomically, or race, or politics, or faith. There was none. And that's the world that we grew up in. And what that taught us was that everything else was a little scary because it was just unknown. So we showed up and realized, okay, there are all of these differences. They're not scary. And there's just brokenness everywhere. It takes different shape. So we show up and kind of see this brokenness from, face to face, eyeball to eyeball. And it's just not, either it doesn't exist to the degree we thought it did, and that's comforting in some ways, or it's every bit as bad as we thought it would be, and we realize it's not scary. You can't love what you don't know. Right. And the more we know our neighbor and know our people, the more we love them, the more we understand them. And it's just not scary. I mean, that idea scares a lot of people. Like, well, but you don't bring people on drugs around your kids, do you? Well, we absolutely do. There's just not a good way around it. And so some of my favorite people, some of the people that if I talk about them too long, I will sob on this video. I adore them. I love them with my whole heart. I would give my hand, I would remove my hand if it could take away their addiction. I mean, I never knew that I could feel that way, very honestly. And I do. And I love when they come into my home.
How have you not drowned from experiencing the very real brokenness around you?
I write a lot about sad things now. I haven't been writing quite as much, and we just feel sadness more. We feel more sadness than we've ever felt, and we feel more hope than we've ever felt. And you cannot just have one. So if you want the fullness of life, you have to take it all. Writing is a way that I process my life and my world, and it's a way that I kind of make sense of things. But it's the hard things that compel me to write. Yeah. Kind of step out beyond it a little bit and shifts my perspective enough to see there is hope. And the love is so very present through the hard things. Our son Robert moved in when he was 20, maybe, and by all accounts, he lived with us. He's lived with us a couple of times. He's very, very much a part of our life. He's absolutely one of us, and our child, and we are his mom and his dad. And there's just no way around that. However, his life, by all outside appearances, has only gotten worse since he came into our family in many ways. If we are not careful to define success in different ways, then, you know, I mean, Corey and I honestly joke about it a little bit because you have to have some levity.
Right. Yeah.
For our son.
Right.
And we believe, you know, I just beg God for him on his behalf. But he moved in, he lived with us for a while. You know, when even back before he was officially part of our family, I mean, it almost can seem sometimes like the more we get to know people, our evangelical background would say that, you know, now that they're exposed to our life and our world and our gospel, that everything's going to improve. It seems very much the opposite.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah.
You know, life has not, you know, when he lived with us the first time, a couple of people asked me and they were skeptical. I mean, you want to talk about people flipping out?
Right.
Talk about the fact when you say we have now adopted a 19-year-old felon.
Right.
He's in prison right now, but as soon as he gets out of prison, he's moving into our basement with his ankle monitor. I mean, people were concerned gravely.
Right.
And because I know who I'm speaking to right now, and I know that I can go here, but he is 6'4" African American young man from a very difficult history and neighborhood, and so our heart loved him immediately and was not, I mean, we just loved him, but many people around us were seeing a lot of this, you know, they were feeling their biases, whether they would admit that or not. He's having a window into almost every part of our life and deciding at the same time that he does not really want our God. And that's something that is hard for us and hard. I worry that it's hard for Corey because he loves his job. He was made for this. And he, you know, these guys in jail are at rock bottom. They're at their lowest point. They are desperate for God. They're finding God and discovering him. But the hard part happens when they leave. The hard part happens when they regain some of their freedom. And the whole world is coming at them. And we're expecting things from convicted felons that we are expecting things at the same time that we are guaranteeing they will never succeed. So we are not becoming their people, and we are not sticking our necks out to give them jobs, and we are not helping them find places to live. Until Robert moved out of our home as a convicted felon, I had no idea how impossible some of those barriers are. Our biggest hope is that our neighbors would come to know God, because we know that, but when I say neighbors, I use that word a little too broadly, probably for most ears, but when I say neighbors, I mean all of our people, wherever they are, whoever they are. We believe that Christ is their only hope, but we also believe that we can't give them that. You know, we can show them God's love and we can answer questions. We can do all those things, but we can't give them salvation. And anytime our friends are exposed to the love of God is life-changing, we want them, when they relapse, to call us and to know that they can, and to know that they're still welcome in our home, and to know that they don't have to be so ashamed that they can't reach out to help, you know. And so we share a lot of our crap with them. We talk about the ways we've gotten life very wrong and the huge mistakes we've made. Because it's just anytime you can just close that bridge and come from a perspective of, listen, we are all kind of a mess. Quite honestly.
Amen.
When Robert lived in our home, trust me, that he saw very much what a mess I am. I mean, and he still sees it.
Oh, yeah. I think that's exactly right. And it's a lot messier than we ever anticipated. So what would you suggest for people who either feel unwilling or a bit hamstrung to kind of make the same sort of decision as you? How can our hearts still be inclined to get outside of ourselves?
The important thing to remember is, when I'm talking about my story, I'm talking about the past 5 years. So, and I always like to remind people of that. So for me, it started with surrendering just a little bit of control over my life. And that happened when we found ourselves facing infertility that was never explained. There was no reason, no explanation. And now we're going to adopt. Okay. That's not how we had pictured our family, but that's the family God had for us from the beginning. He knew this. And so I look back on that now as like, that was the first step into surrendering some control. It was the prayer that I started praying was just, God, let me see people the way you see them. And so that is absolutely the first place to start. And you can still start praying to see God, to see people the way God sees them. And that is going to change your life. And it's going to, it's going to wreck it in some ways.
Right.
And the even more terrifying thing is you will begin to see yourself the way God sees you. And that can be really beautiful and very hard. It was very hard for me to begin to really see my own brokenness, which is so essential, so needed for me to begin to see that. I mean, God is so much bigger than we know he is. He's so much bigger than, whether or not our husbands are on board or whether we live in the suburbs or the village or the country or the town. He's bigger and he's at work and he's waiting for us to pay attention. As much as we can surrender our schedule and our plans and our security and our money and begin to our kids, I mean, as much as we can begin to just have the okay, God, do your thing and please let me be a part of it. That helps so much. And Corey and I were even talking again about finding some way to get out of our own head sometimes is really helpful. So finding some way to just be with somebody in a meaningful way is a good way to get the focus off of our own. I mean, I sit here at home as a writer
I know.
all day alone. I have way too much time in my own head and way too much time to just commiserate with myself over life. And, those are the times that it's like, go to the neighborhood meeting, go to the school, go have coffee with one of your neighbors. I mean, do something. Right.
Get out of your own head and your own mind.
Get out.
Yeah.
Yes. We're all better for it.
Yes.
I want to live from a place that is all about keeping the door ajar and being ready and willing to open it. And one of my favorite things to take a picture of is chain link fence with a flower coming through. And if I ever see that, I'm going to take a picture on Instagram because that has become such a metaphor for my life and for the world around me. I mean, that's the freedom. The freedom is being able to look at all of the brokenness and feel way down into your bones that God's love is there in every single bit of it. He does not leave us alone. He is screaming, cheering for us. He is rooting for us. He is with us. I mean, and I didn't know a lot of that back when I was solving my own problems and back when I was, there's a verse in Isaiah that for us was the right thing to do. So
yeah, that's great. And also, would you be willing to share one of your favorite salsa recipes with Mudroom readers?
I have one go-to salsa recipe. I'm just going to awkwardly, I'm right here by my fridge. This is your lucky day.
Yay.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
This is not planned. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I just made that yesterday.
Look at that.
So you got to see the big
for salsa. I love
the jug of salsa. Here's the thing. I'm not to brag, but I took the award last month in my city as the award-winning mild salsa. I won the category of mild. Right. I was nervous because, I mean, almost everybody else that entered was Latino. And I'm sitting there waiting for the winners to be announced. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my word, I'm going to be so embarrassed if I win. So wrong. The beauty of this recipe is it is made with canned tomatoes.
Ooh,
so you can make it year round, and you should. And I do.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon, so much for having us. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you for having me. We should do this every morning.
I know, it's super fun.